Okay, welcome to Back to School, a podcast where two highly opinionated design system consultants put aside their deep set assumptions to dive deep on design systems topics. Climb aboard the school bus for a field trip on the history, the lessons, and the people that really make a design system truly great. So today, Geri, we're talking about Figma UI kits. And
We are.
Geri is driving the school bus today. It was me last time, but it's you now.
Indeed.
So,
So, yeah, going back to design system school, obviously researching different aspects of design systems in order to get some fresh perspectives, view things with new eyes. So, as Amy said, we're taking turns to research topics, and this week I get to drive the school bus. So, buckle up, Amy, you're in for a wild and nerdy ride. Today's
lovely.
hot topic is Figma UI kits. Now, you came up with this topic suggestion, which I found curious because you're not a designer. Why did you think Figma UI kits would be something that would be good to do a podcast episode on?
First of all, savage that you're branding me not a designer. Content designers are designers too.
Sorry.
No, absolutely not a designer in any way. Yeah, I did suggest this topic because I think the thing that fascinates me about Figma UI kits is the fixation on them from people working in design systems. And I mean that both positively and negatively. So they tend to really kind of polarize views, I think, around design systems. So what I see is a lot of people going on Twitter/X, whatever it's called, Mastodon, Blue Sky, saying your Figma UI kit is not a design system. People kind of really advocating for code being the source of truth, kind of poo-pooing Figma UI kits as pictures of websites and not really important in the grand scheme of things. And then I also work with a lot of people. I see a lot of people really kind of laboring over their Figma UI kits and trying to make them really perfect. And sometimes that involves trying to create this really intricate kind of parity with the code. And sometimes it's not that. Sometimes it's about pushing the boundaries beyond what's technically possible. And so I think the general kind of fascination with Figma UI kits is what drew me to this topic. And I think there's a lot of opinions out there. So as is the point of this podcast, I thought it'd be interesting to look at it from a more objective lens.
Excellent stuff. Okay, so as we're going back to school, I've broken my research down into subject areas and we're starting with a history lesson. I thought before we talk about the history of Figma UI kits, we really should give this some context by starting off with a quick history of Figma. So you've effectively got double history this month. So if you cast your mind back to your own heady university days in around 2012, while you were snogging people and binge drinking, Dylan Field and Evan Wallace were busy working on Figma while studying computer science at Brown University. Now, the intriguing thing is Figma didn't start off life as the cloud-based design tool that we use today. I'm kicking off our history lesson with a surprise pop quiz to keep you on your toes, Amy. Are you ready?
Jesus, no. In no way am I ready for this.
Did Figma start off life as A, a 3D content generator, B, software for drones, or C, a meme generator?
What on earth is a 3D content generator? That's so weird. I don't think you would have thrown that in as a random option. So I'm going to go with that.
Okay, that was actually a trick question. The Figma Wikipedia page
Oh,
says Field and Wallace started off experimenting with all these ideas. The common thread linking them was creating tools that work in the browser. At the time, software was desktop stuff. You downloaded it onto your computer and ran it locally. I remember designing UI in Photoshop. You needed your own copy of Photoshop, or at least one you'd successfully bootlegged, and you saved your files on your Mac, and only one person could open a file at one time. We then had Sketch, which kind of exploded onto the UI scene in around 2012. I don't know if you remember this time, but Adobe had such a sort of stranglehold on the market, and it was taken on by this little underdog of an app that, if I remember rightly, cost like $50 or something. Sketch was suddenly a really decent design tool for the UI. I think because it was vector based, UI mockups finally looked crisp after years in the rasterized badlands of Photoshop. So my next
Rasterized Badlands. Can we take a moment for rasterized Badlands, please?
Photoshop is a photo editing tool, and we used it to design UI, which is just completely wrong.
Suddenly
Anyway.
plunged into the public sphere again because of old Kate Middleton.
Exactly. Yeah.
Fascinating. I'm fascinated by that.
I'm disgusted at myself for being so fascinated with it, but
I'm not
we need to send her on a
joking.
course. You need to do
It's
some Photoshop course.
genuinely, I've been ill for the past week, and I reckon I've spent on average 8 hours a day down Kate Middleton conspiracy TikTok. This is the most I've ever cared about the royals ever, or indeed Photoshop. So absolutely fascinating.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad it's of the moment. Are you
Yes.
ready for my next quiz question?
I am. Well, no, but go on.
If you'd been paying attention at Luke Murphy's Zero Height Nerd quiz at Patterns Day, this was one of the questions. What year was Figma released?
Now, I was not paying attention to that. However, I do think I know the answer to this. I think it was 2016, because I think we got Trump and Figma in the same year.
It's a very strange correlation, but you are correct.
Yay, thank you.
Oh, your score's gone up from a C to a B minus.
Amazing. Amazing.
I mean, yeah, I guess the thing with Figma is it was finally available in the browser. This is the idea that won Figma the tooling war. This meant stakeholders who used a PC could view designs, everyone could leave comments on them. And, I guess the biggest win was the multiplayer thing. Everyone could pitch in and work on the same file. And if you look at tooling trends, from around 2018, Sketch usage dropped off and Figma just rocketed. When do you first remember using Figma?
Do you want to know the honest truth to this?
Was it last year?
Last year? No, I don't really use Figma, to be honest. It's not really part of I will use it to collaborate with other people. So I use it to review designs, review content and designs, and make some small content edits. But I'm not as you've very clearly pointed out, Geri, I'm not a kind of a UI designer in any way. So I've never used Figma to design stuff, but to collaborate with other people and to review content and things. Probably I reckon it was on my first consultancy role. So my first design systems role was for gov.uk, and that was all design with code. So didn't use it there at all. And I think I used it in my first consultancy role in 2020.
Yeah, it kind of got a bit of traction. As a design tool, we've kind of seen it grow up. It's added some great features like prototyping, supporting variables, dev mode, which came out recently. I guess the only other notable thing to mention in Figma's history is the near acquisition by Adobe last year.
RIP.
After a year of legal wrangling, they couldn't get the regulatory approvals they needed from the European Commission. Do you know how much Adobe offered to pay for Figma?
If I guess, I'm so bad with numbers. So
No, I am too.
But I think it was in the millions. My instant reaction was 2 billion. And then I was like,
no, it's more. It's 20 billion.
20 billion.
I had to
oh my God.
That because I thought I typed it and then I thought that must be wrong.
Not being funny. Not worth it. Not worth it. Nothing's worth that in the world. Nothing in the world is worth that. Nothing against Figma, but 20 billion.
It's ridiculous.
No,
if only we'd spent our time at university doing this sort of stuff rather than drinking pints in the student union, we could be doing this podcast from my own private island.
Don't know what you mean, Geri. I was very diligent at uni, as you'll gather from my podcast prep.
Yeah, okay, let's move on. So, very quick history of Figma there, but we're not leaving history class. Today, it's double history this month.
I love history. I did my degree in history. So
did you?
I did, yeah.
Right up your street.
Yes.
We are actually climbing aboard a time machine for a hurtle through the history of UI pattern libraries. So my first question, who do you attribute componentizing UI design to? Who comes to mind when you think about, breaking down a UI into components?
Oh, my immediate knee-jerk response to that was Nathan Curtis. However, I'm going to say it probably started like way back when. I mean, it probably started like way before I'm thinking about like Christopher Alexander and like design pattern, like architectural design patterns and things. But now I'm remembering that if nobody's read it, you should definitely go and read it, because it's one of my favorite design system blog posts of all time. There was this blog post by Cristiano Rosselli, which was talking about componentizing medieval cathedrals, I think, as like medieval cathedrals as design systems, which is absolutely fascinating. So don't know. Nathan Curtis was my knee-jerk response, but I imagine like componentizing design more broadly probably goes back a very long way.
I actually bumped into Cristiano Rosselli yesterday and said, can you please write more blog posts? Because he's always doing interesting work and thinking interesting thoughts, and he hasn't blogged in ages. Circling back around, I guess people started to catalogue like coding patterns in the early 90s. There was a book called Design Patterns published in 1994 by a group of engineers who were called the Gang of Four, who sounds like a bit of a kind of groovy folk band.
Sounds like a rap band. Yeah.
Gang of Four. I think you're on the right lines with Nathan Curtis. There were people like Erin Malone who worked on the Yahoo pattern library. I think it was in about 2006. Nathan Curtis wrote modular web design back in 2009 off the back of the work he did for Sun.com in 2006. We often reference Nathan from his like later Medium posts, but I actually grabbed modular web design off the shelf, and it does reference things like Lego and analogies that we often attribute to Brad Frost and people further down the line. So yeah, I think Nathan is always very humble about it, but I think he needs more kudos for the early thinking around componentizing UI.
He is truly the grandfather of design systems, isn't he? No comment on his age, just how long he's been doing it for.
Grandfather?
Yeah, I just mean because he's been doing it a long time.
Younger than me.
Shut up, Geri. Someone in the Caroline in the comments has just said, fun fact, Gang of Four is actually an excellent indie band from Leeds. Oh no, correction, post-punk band.
Oh, correction. Thanks for that, Carolina.
Check them out. Check them out.
Oh, I think you're showing your age with your rap band, Amy.
All right. I'm not the grandfather of design systems.
Okay. Coming back to componentizing UI.
Yes.
I remember the first component sticker sheets in about 2011. Frameworks like Bootstrap and Zerb's Foundation, they didn't officially come with UI design kits, but people made them in Photoshop and shared them on community sites. Do you remember something called style tiles?
Absolutely not. No, what is it?
No. Well, it's an interesting one. It was in 2012. Samantha Warren published this List Apart article with the style tile idea. And style tiles got together a kind of look and feel for a website, like the color palette, the fonts, the icons. And I feel like this sort of evolved into the foundational styling elements that we picked up and eventually incorporated into our design system UI libraries. So it's kind of I haven't thought about those for a long time since I started looking at that. Of course, there's Atomic Design, Brad Frost's article, which, he first published in 2013, which introduced all the science metaphors like atoms, molecules, and organisms that a lot of design systems still riff off. I think Google's Material Design was the first proper design system that I remember releasing a UI sticker sheet and Sketch.
Wow.
If anyone's been around as long as me and remembers anything earlier, do share in the chat. I remember poring over this, after years of Photoshop, it kind of felt like the future. And Material is still Figma's most downloaded UI kit in the Figma community.
Is it? Interesting.
Yeah, you said that like it was really interesting.
I actually do think it's interesting, but I'm also... Anyway, no, this is a non-opinion based podcast, so let's
let's move on.
Breeze past that. Yeah.
Final point in my history lesson, the 2023 UX tool survey says 89% of design systems reported they now use Figma as their primary design tool. So they've got the market pretty much sewn up.
Wow.
Sorry, Sketch. RIP Envision. Thanks for the memories, Clark.
Thanks for the memories.
It was beautiful while it lasted. Okay, that was a long old history lesson, wasn't it? Why don't we move on?
I had a lovely time. I really enjoyed it.
Okay, Amy, if you want to put on your protective apron, you're going to get your
Okay,
hands dirty in a home economics class, that is cooking
lovely.
class for people outside of the UK. You are a great cook, Amy. I've seen some pretty banging looking cakes that you shared on social media.
Thank you. It's actually food tech in the UK, just to let you know.
Is
But
it food tech?
food
Oh,
tech,
I grew up in
yeah.
New Zealand. It's called home economics.
Home
Food
economics.
tech. Okay,
Home
I don't know.
economics is such a funny name for it, I
Yeah,
think.
I know. Makes it sound fancy.
Yeah.
Okay, so your challenge, Amy, is to write a recipe. What are the ingredients of a decent Figma UI kit for a design system? What would you
A,
expect to see in there?
a decent Figma UI kit.
Well, just a ropey one, a UI kit.
Just a ropey old one.
Okay.
I'd expect styles, components, and design patterns.
Mm-hmm.
I'd expect some documentation. I'd expect some level of automation with the code base, I think. And I'd expect, don't know, that's all that springs to mind. Maybe some kind of, I don't know how much, I don't know what we're talking about when we're saying recipe, but like some kind of versioning system as well, some sort of like thought about versioning system and
Well,
release model.
you've gone far fancier than I was expecting.
Oh,
Yeah, foundational styles, I'd say, yeah, color palette, type, spacing, icons, tokens, which we are going to cover next week. So, there'd probably be
next
details
month,
next
I
month.
hope.
Oh, God, not
Otherwise, I'm
next week.
far behind on my research.
Otherwise, I'm far behind on my research.
Please, God, next month. Yeah.
UI components, as you say, maybe some larger patterns or templates. I don't know if they have a place in a core library file, maybe not. Documentation. This is an interesting one. You mentioned it. Now, Zero Heights How We Document report, which if you haven't downloaded, you should, because it has some excellent insights. It's got an interesting section on tooling, and it says 64% of respondents use their primary design tool for documentation. This really intrigues me. As a content specialist, what are your thoughts on documentation in a Figma library?
I have some interest. Yeah. So I would say as a documentation tool, like for written guidance, that's not what it's designed for. So there are some obvious limitations, like you can't semantically mark up the text in there, for example. So by default, it's inaccessible. There are, it's difficult to kind of share that content outside of Figma. There are problems with it. It's using a tool in a way that it wasn't designed for, something that it wasn't designed for. So I don't love it from that perspective. However, I am a very big advocate of creating documentation that kind of meets people where they are. And I have worked with clients before where we've made the decision to include the kind of written guidance that sits alongside components and styles and patterns and things in Figma, because that was the main touch point for the design system. That's where it made most sense to put it. So mixed feelings about it. I don't have a very strong, unnuanced, do not do this, like dogmatic opinion about it. But I do think that there are limitations with it, and we should at least be aware of those if we're going to pop all of our documentation in there.
No, I completely agree with you. I always think it's great to talk to the people where the people hang out. If the people are hanging out in Figma and then you've got this doc site that they're not going to look at, maybe it's better to communicate to them in Figma. There are some tools coming out that kind of bridge the gap. The last systems contract I did at BPP, they were using a Figma plugin called Ditto to manage their content. So like their UI content, not their documentation. It's like a kind of single source of truth for content to keep UX copy consistent. I kind of like the idea of something that sits in between Figma and the stuff you're writing, because writing directly into Figma really sucks. You want to be writing into like a Google Doc or a web interface or something. Trying to maintain documentation within Figma, which I've done before, is quite hard work.
For sure. Yeah, I'm interested in that too. And I think it's this is something that I've written about quite a lot and tried to kind of explore through kind of client work, is can we start to approach documentation the same way that we approach actual kind of components and tokens and things that sit in design systems. So have a kind of canonical source of truth, that documentation, but then that allows us to then publish it into places like Figma or Storybook or a doc site or wherever else people are going. I would love that, but I don't think anybody has kind of successfully done it so far.
There you go. There's a great opportunity for someone. Can we have a Figma plugin, please, that does that nicely?
Yes, please.
Okay. I think that's the end of my food tech lesson for you. The final section in our food tech class, though, I have called janitorial arts.
Wow.
We're going to have a think about sanitation, how you keep your Figma UI kits tidy and organized. So would you describe yourself as tidy and organized, Amy?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. If I pan the camera out right now to show you my kitchen,
So
I've got a pile of recycling the size of the Eiffel Tower next to me, and all of my washing, which is a mix of clean and dirty, on the floor. And I would say it very much represents my way of working as well.
Okay, thank you
Yeah.
for that. Yeah, I've now got one wall, so you can't see all the carnage that goes on the other side.
No, same. You can see my iron, but that's about as bad as it gets.
I hadn't even noticed that, so thanks for pointing that out. I'm not going to be able to unsee it now.
Sorry.
So I'm going to start my foray into the janitorial arts with versioning, which you mentioned before. Now,
I did.
We've been versioning code since MIT in the 1970s, but versioning our design files is something which has only really just started to happen in the past few years. Figma supports version history, like a chronological list of all your saves, but not direct version control. I found a really nice Medium piece on versioning your Figma library from the Into Design Systems crew. If you want to look it up, it's titled Versioning Design Systems Best Practices. I actually went to their meetup last night. They had a meetup at Meta. Massive props to them. They run an absolute masterclass meetup, and their conferences really do a great kind of hands-on technical deep dive into Figma a lot of the time. Anyway, digression. I pulled out the key points from their article. So, advice on best practices for versioning design systems. So, first up, they advocate using version numbers and semantic versioning to clearly indicate the types of updates and their impact on the system. Are you familiar with semantic versioning and how it works?
I absolutely am, actually, which is going to be astonishing to you. Good old Semver.
No,
Semver is what
a bit
we
of
call it when we
Semver.
A bit of Semver. Yeah, I know it.
Nice.
Major minor patch.
Oh, I was going to say, can you explain how it works? But it sounds like you've just done it.
Yes, so there's basically 3 numbers in a Semver version. The first one represents your major version, which is breaking changes, I believe, although there is some debate around what constitutes a breaking change. Then there's minor updates, right, which is like non-breaking but reasonably significant changes. And then there's patches, which are like bug fixes, typo fixes, that kind of thing. The stuff no one really cares about. So if we went from a 3.2.1 to a 4.2.1, that would represent an update in your major version, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Major is a big number release, so like a breaking change. So like if you rename something or deprecated something, and upgrading has the potential to cause breaking changes. As you say, the second one's a minor versions. If you, I don't know, like add functionality, add a new component or a variant, but if it's done in a backwards compatible manner, so people can upgrade without breaking.
Yeah.
And yeah, as you say, the last one is a patch version, where you're kind of making backwards compatible bug fixes. And as you say, there's a website, semver.org, which details it all.
It does, and it's actually I think it's very well documented. As someone who's not a developer, not necessarily a technical person in this space, I find it quite clear and intuitive to understand. It did always used to break my brain a bit that adding a new component was not a major update, because that, from the design systems team point of view, that always seems to represent a really significant amount of work. So to then only bump up that middle number always felt a little bit of a anticlimax, but I understand.
It's quite nice though, doing a big number release. If you can tie it in with something, it's always nice to say, we've got a version 4.0 and it breaks everything you've done previously. Oh no, it's got a massive upgrade to you.
Yay! Yeah. It's going to ruin your life, but then it will make it so much better.
Yeah, if you just hang in there with us.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's Semver semantic versioning. Next on the list of best practices from the article is creating a change log. So a document that records the improvements and bug fixes made in each version of the design system. obviously an essential record of, what the systems team have been doing, let your consumers know what's happening, why the changes were made, what we've been doing. As a content specialist, do you have any thoughts or advice on change logs? I imagine you've been involved in writing them.
Yeah, I mean, like, write one. That would be my first piece of advice. I think so many teams don't write them. Say things that are actually helpful. So I think one thing that's kind of, if you're updating your changelog in GitHub, then GitHub will tell you which files have changed. So I've seen teams where they kind of list out all the file changes that they've made. And it's like, you don't need to do that because that's included already in the kind of pull request record. So say what's changed in a way that's meaningful to your actual users. I think they can be kind of fun, like Monzo's change notes. I just nerd out over. I love them. They're always really nicely written. They're always very clear, and they're kind of cute and funny, and I think there's room for cute and funny in change notes, as long as you still make sure it's clear and stuff. I think like they don't have to be boring. That's what I would say. Get creative.
I guess I'd look at it in two ways. It's nice to have some kind of automated log. As you say, the thing that comes from GitHub is quite useful because no one, engineers are just updating that as they go, and it can automatically populate something. But yeah, if you're doing an announcement, I think it's really nice to have a bit of personality. And it's the one place you can kind of get across the personality of the design system, which is really nice.
Yeah, I think so. Nice to have a bit of spice up something that's generally a bit dull.
Is a bit dull. I think you could probably go a bit extra with it, but yeah, on the whole, I do like a bit of personality there.
Yeah.
Okay, so next thing on the list is communicating changes with consumers and stakeholders to make sure they understand the reasoning behind the updates and how they will affect the final product. Obviously, if it's going to cause a load of rework for them, and they'll need to know like a long way in advance so they can factor it into their sprints. As a design systems lead, what do you think are the best ways that you've found for communicating changes around things like Figma UI kits?
Oh, holy moly. I think we always want there to be this kind of silver bullet way of doing that, where we can sort of publish updates in one place and everyone will go look at them. And I have found that the best way to make sure everybody knows what they need to know is just spam, repetition, like just all the channels, face-to-face conversations as much as you can. I think just trying to really kind of hammer home when there's an update that people need to know about, and not just at the point of release as well, but in advance of it, like when it's coming, any changes to that release date, when it's actually been released, and then maybe even after the fact, like a couple of weeks later or something, especially if it's something where people need to make a change at their end to do it. I think, it's a real kind of, the best thing is just a real scattergun approach.
No, I completely agree. I mean, as we said before, talk to the people where they hang out. Often a Slack channel is really useful, or wherever the people hang out in your organization.
Just skulk by the water cooler.
Have you heard about this great new release?
Yeah. Just skulk by the water cooler wearing a t-shirt with a photo of your new component on it. Ask me about the button.
Oh, dear me.
Yeah.
I guess ultimately what it all boils down to is, I don't know, having a defined process for how new versions of components and will be introduced, how things will be tested and deployed. And that's the sort of process you need to work out as a team. And from experience, it sort of evolves and is constantly reshaped over time.
Definitely, absolutely. I think, as you say, kind of, I think that there's your sort of official approach, which is like, where do you write stuff? Where does it get posted to? How much of that can you automate? And then there's also the more kind of schmoozy, like fluid side of that, which is like, is there a show and tell going on in your team, in your department or something? Can you go to it and just mention this? Like, can you go and talk to some people that are influential in your organization and let them know what's going on, that kind of thing. I think just don't worry about becoming, I think people worry about becoming annoying and like repeating themselves too much and spamming people with information, but people are pretty good at filtering out what they don't need, I think. So just harp on and on about it till someone bashes you over the head. I think so.
That was everything from this article, which is excellent. I guess the only other point I had to make on versioning is what do you version? There's kind of different schools of thought on whether you should version like a whole kit or whether you should version individual components. And do these numbered releases align with code releases of the same number? I guess it's all kind of dependent on system setups and, circles back around to the point on having a process. But yeah, I mean, hats off to anyone that individually versions components. I've never been down that road, but I'd be interested to, have you worked on a system?
I've worked on a system where we did do that, initially, and then we switched over to a kind of single package partway through the kind of evolution of the system. I think it works when you're in those earlier days and you're being a bit scrappy and you're just trying to start to kind of get the idea of systems into the organization. You're starting to kind of try and get some of what you've built into live products. It can be helpful to individually version components as a way of allowing you that kind of flexibility and allowing teams that flexibility. But I think it falls down very quickly as the system gets bigger and more sophisticated, because it's not really a system, right? It's just a collection of components. Brad Frost has written a very interesting and helpful article about this, which is clear but also not patronizing, about individually packaged components versus single package design systems. And I definitely recommend going to read that. Can't remember what it's called, but if you search like Brad Frost versioning, it will come up.
Okay, awesome. Good recommendation. So along with versioning, the other vital vocational module that you need to pass janitorial arts is how to set up and structure your Figma UI kit and keep it tidy and organized. Now, that's a huge topic and probably a whole podcast in itself, but I did find 2 useful resources. On Zero Height's blog, there's a post called How to Organize Your Figma Files for Your Design System, which is really detailed and worth checking out. And also for more practical kind of how-to stuff, the Figma advocates share some excellent templates with suggested structures. I know Louis has some good ones on the Figma community. He's disco_Lou. So yeah,
Louis
check those out.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Good to know. Yeah, there's a lot of good ones out there. I think seeing something that already exists and being able to copy it if you're not quite sure how to structure something is quite useful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So check out those resources for design system housekeeping. I guess the other notable mention is Figma plugins, which can help automate some of your file hygiene. I guess, as all Figma users know, plugins are little programs created by the Figma community to extend the functionality of Figma. You can run a plugin in a Figma file to do just about anything, speed stuff up, accessibility, format, lint, all sorts of things. Now, if we had a look back at the Zero Height Design System Awards last year, they had a category for plugins. Totally put you on the spot here because you're a judge on the awards. Do you remember who the winner was?
I was off my face on free champagne by the time that was announced. However, I believe it was, sorry, just telling the truth. I believe it was Figma. Was it Token Studio?
Congratulations, Amy.
It was a very memorable acceptance speech from good old Luke Finch, who works on the team at Token Studio. Yeah.
I was supposed to come that night.
Thank you to you were sick, yeah.
I was really sick, yeah.
Yeah, and I was very unwell the next day, so it came full circle. But Luke got on stage, I think, and said thank you to Token Studio for doing what Figma couldn't.
Ooh,
was the way that he accepted. Yeah, the room sort of fell into an awkward silence, and then there was a big cheer.
Oh dear. Okay, nice work. Thank you. You can always rely on Luke.
Yeah.
So the top 4 plugins that made the cut, which are all worth highlighting, 8Shape Specs, Nathan Curtis's plugin that creates design specs to hand off to engineering. Excellent plugin. I'm sure you tested all these, Amy, quite thoroughly as a design systems judge.
Very, very thoroughly. I did not test them, but I did talk to people that I know use them in their day-to-day work. I read all the documentation. I judged them quite heavily on documentation because that's my bias. And
we'll let you off there.
Yeah.
Variables converter. From memory of testing, it converts your Figma variables to CSS custom properties and JavaScript variables, something like that. There's one called OxyScan that lets you test design files to check they're correctly consuming design system components. And as you say, yes, the winner was Token Studio, which allows you to create and manage tokens for theming, and allows you to automate the pipeline between Figma and code. So
Yeah.
awesome plugin. It seems to have just taken off. Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts on your poorly kept house before we sweep all the raw hex values under the carpet and move on?
Don't think so, Geri. I think the listeners have heard quite enough about my poorly kept house for today.
Okay, so moving on, we are keeping it classy and a bit highbrow this month, asking the big questions.
Are we? I didn't sign off on this.
I've got an ethics class where I'm going to
Goodness.
encourage you to think critically about your own design systems, values, and beliefs. Take a seat on Dr. Freud's design systems couch, handcrafted from token values. So now we all know what's in a UI kit. Here's the question. What is the actual purpose of a Figma UI kit? Now, I'm a designer, but from your more kind of design systems management perspective, I'm interested in what you think the purpose of a Figma UI kit is.
What a question. I think, what a question. Because now I'm sort of thinking in my head, like, what's Figma for? And I'm wanting to answer on that basis. But a Figma UI kit, I suppose, is for, ideally, it's for giving designers the same set of parameters to work with as their developer counterparts.
Yeah, I would say so. Any other value?
To help make prototyping more quick and efficient.
There you go. That was probably the other one I'd say.
Yeah, I reckon so.
Yeah, I think, defining the system styles and foundational values, lots of people define their tokens in Figma. As you say, allowing systems engineers to build components using the right tokens, with all the intended props and naming conventions. Providing them this to product designers so they can make quick prototypes and map out a product journey. Then, test the journey on real consumers and troubleshoot any problems before it gets built in code.
In a software tool, just like all consumers use.
Yeah, it sounds like you have opinions about that. Would you like to share them?
No, I actually don't, to be honest. It makes me laugh that people have so many debates about this. I think I'm up for kind of testing things in the most high fidelity manner that you can, but with the caveat that do it in a way that's proportionate to where you're at in the design process. Like if you're literally at the stage of concepts, probably not worth building out a big code-based prototype using, very almost like production ready HTML, like not really valuable thing to do. So I think that I don't have an issue with people prototyping in tools like Figma. I think that it makes perfect sense depending on where you're at in your design process.
Yeah, it's kind of a difficult one because, as you say, there are a lot of designers that get really into making these kind of pixel perfect UI kits, and they almost become like a thing in themselves, this kind of artifact of beauty.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of struggle with that a bit because for me, no end consumer is ever going to see your lovely UI kit.
I think
it goes in.
I definitely think it can. It's like all of these things where people have very dogmatic opinions. It's nuance, isn't it? It's about how you use it. Like it's a tool for, I think even the people that work for Figma would not, like the ones I know anyway, would not advocate using Figma to develop kind of pixel perfect prototypes that completely match what's going into production. I think that they, as I said, I think they play a role in the design process, and sometimes they're pushed beyond what that role needs to be.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like a lot of effort sometimes goes into them, and to me, they're kind of a means to an end. Like often now, if I get all the underpinnings on a system together, I can literally just write out a spec, like a written spec for engineers, rather than them having to see a design component, because if everything's tokenized, if all your spacing and your color and all your values are tokenized, then you're just speccing it out with tokens. They don't even have to look at Figma. So I don't know. It's a funny one for me.
I think I suppose the value is it's not just there for developer handoff, right? Like it's there for showing your stakeholders what the end result is going to look like and having meaningful discussions around those things and helping people kind of visualize where you're headed with it. So I think for developer handoff, yes, writing a spec might be sufficient. But for those kind of internal discussions, especially if you've got a lot of non-technical stakeholders, having stuff in Figma can help to kind of bring your ideas to life a bit, I guess, and avoid like wasted time down the line.
No, that's very true. Okay, so my next question is a big ethical minefield, which might get you cancelled.
Excellent. Bring it on then.
What is the source of truth in a design system? Is it the Figma library? Is it the code? Or is it the documentation that pulls it all together?
I love this question. One of my most viral tweets was, what is the plural of source of truth? What is the plural of single source of truth? And some people took it completely at face value. I got loads and loads of replies, people going, that's an oxymoron, which really made me laugh. And then I got people who understood that I was being facetious. I'm not interested in conversations about source of truth. I think the system itself is the source of truth, and Figma and code and documentation are just the ways that truth manifests. I think it's like the actual knowledge and information and parameters themselves that are the source of truth. Not asked about where the canonical like source is for that information, particularly wherever it makes sense for your company for it to live. But I also, this really gets me, this topic. I also think when you're talking about source of truth, you have to be mindful that there are at least two ways to look at that. There's like, what is the source of truth for the design system maintainers, and what is the source of truth for the users of the design system? And that might be different. Like we might, as a design system team, consider like our code in our GitHub repository our source of truth, and a user of the design system might only consult a Figma UI kit and consider that to be their source of truth. So I think it's a garbage question, Geri, no offense, but I know that you didn't I know you didn't come up with it. I know that it's banded about the community.
Oh, interesting opinion, Amy. It's not like you'd have an interesting opinion.
I know, very unlike me.
For me, historically, the source of truth has always been the code, because, this is what our customers interact with. No one outside of design will ever see your Figma UI kit. But then, now there's a lot of systems using plugins like Token Studio, or they're using Figma variables to generate their tokens, which are their core styling values. And a couple of the systems I've worked on have automated the pipeline from Figma through to GitHub. So you make all your foundational style decisions in Figma, and you have a plugin that automatically pushes it through to code, creates a PR, and effectively allows designers to update what's live in the product. So I don't know. I'm now wondering if the design is the Figma file actually the source of truth rather than the code?
I think it depends so much on your design process as well, doesn't it? Like what are the stages that your design process goes through? Like, because it's not when I understand that argument, and I kind of tend to agree. Like, I think just given the choice and given a blank canvas, I'd probably start with code as the source of truth and work from there. However, like when people cling to that very dogmatically, that I think they're often conflating like the design and the systematization of that design. So the source of truth, the most like honest representation of your design, is your live product, which is built using code, and that code is your source of truth for your product's design. However, like that code could not be systematized at all. Probably will be nowadays, but it might not be. It could just be completely fragmented, all over the place code managed by lots of different disparate teams. And the only place that you're systematizing those design decisions is in your Figma UI kit, in which case, for your design system, that becomes your source of truth. Anyway, shut up, Amy. That's how I feel.
I've got a quick aside here from Plagiarism Corner. I asked our trusted AI partner, ChatGPT, what is the source of truth in a design system? What do you think it went for?
Code.
Interesting. Okay, I'll read it out. The source of truth in a design system refers to the centralized repository of documentation that holds the definitive set of design standards, components, patterns, guidelines, and code snippets that everyone in an organization should follow. So there you go.
All right, ChatGPT, you've starting to win me over. I'm seduced by that argument. Thank you.
I know, that's what I was thinking. I had to include that because I thought you'd enjoy it so much. Go documentation.
I might have been wrong about you, ChatGPT. Maybe you're not so bad after all.
Okay, so now we're getting down to the ethical nitty-gritty. Let's square up to the biggest elephant in the room.
Amazing.
Every so often, you've alluded to this before, every so often someone posts a Figma UI kit on X, the dead bird site, and says, check out my design system, and the comments go wild. My question is, can a Figma UI kit be a design system?
There is an ambulance, a very poorly timed ambulance going past my window right now. And I'd like to say it's not because you asked this question.
Does it come to take you away, Amy?
In fact, it's a fire engine probably putting out the fire that you just caused by asking that. No, I've actually written a blog post about this. Again, I find this question, I find this question about as compelling as what's the source of truth. And when people say this, I just think it lacks nuance. Like, yes, objectively, it's wrong to call a Figma UI kit in and of itself a design system. However, it may well be the only bit of your design system that you have intentionally worked on to date. And I think we've always got to look at the bigger picture, right? So, even if you don't have a code library as part of your design system, that design in your Figma UI kit is somehow getting translated into production. There is code that exists. So look at what those processes are, look at what that code looks like, look at what those artifacts are, and start to consider that as part of your design system, even if you haven't intentionally worked on it so far. I think what gets me about that when there's those arguments and people say your Figma UI kit is not a design system, it's like, that's not actually your problem. Like, probably what you really want to say is like, the designers in my organization really piss me off because they don't understand how things work technically. They don't have any technical knowledge. They're building things that are completely unrealistic to actually reproduce in code. Or, I wish we would focus more on the engineering side of our design system or something else. And I just feel, when I see that, I'm like, say what you mean. Just say what you mean. You want to have an argument? Let's have a real argument. That's how I feel about it. Anyway, no, lovely day. No, it's not a UI kit, but people need to chill out and have more honest conversations around that question, I think. What do you think, Geri?
Yeah, I'm of the same mind, actually. I think people can pile in and be a bit unkind about these things. And as you say, it's, you might be in the process of building out the code, and at the start, your Figma UI kit is all that you have, and that is actually your design system that the design system team's working on. I mean, I have heard instances where the sort of designers working on Figma component libraries without any involvement of engineering, and that's when it kind of tips over into, are you just kind of making pictures of websites? If you haven't actually spoken to the engineers about how these things are being built, maybe how it's being structured atomically, accessibility, all the kind of best practice, you are effectively making these really beautiful pictures of small parts of websites.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I agree with that. I think, as with so many of these things, like some of what we were talking about earlier as well, it's often not the tool or the kind of artifact itself. It's the way that people are using it. A lot of these problems come back to people and relationships and organizational culture. So a Figma UI kit in and of itself is not an offensive thing. It's not bad to only work on that as part of your design system initially, at least. But it's, as you say, it's when it kind of goes too far and it just ends up broadening the gap between designers and developers that it needs to be probably re-looked at.
Yeah, there's all these sort of famous definitions of what is a design system. I was looking through all the design system books. So Alla Kolmatova in the Smashing Design Systems book says a design system is a set of connected patterns and shared practices coherently organized to serve the purposes of a digital product. So I guess in that, you could say maybe a Figma UI kit serves that purpose. Brad Frost says a design system is the official story of how your organization designs and builds digital interfaces. If we measure it against that, maybe. And the one that's bandied around everywhere, Marco Suarez in the Design Systems Handbook, you see this definition everywhere. I think it's been pulled onto Wikipedia. A collection of reusable components guided by clear standards that can be assembled together to build any number of applications. So I guess based on that description, your Figma UI kit can't be your design system.
No.
It kind of sounds a bit meta, but I think maybe a Figma UI kit can be your design system if your company only makes Figma UI kits as their end product.
Oh, Geri, saucy, spicy hot take there.
Oh, okay, let's move on.
Catty, I love it. I don't often see this catty side of you, Geri.
No,
I
I'm
like
a
it.
very kind person, as
Yeah, you
always.
are.
Or outwardly, anyway.
Outwardly.
Final existential crisis question in my ethics class.
Yes.
Are you a real design system without a Figma UI kit? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, the GovUK design system is one of the realest design systems that there is, and there's no Figma UI kit in sight because they don't design with Figma. So, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's interesting having a look through. I had a good scoot through all the ones I have bookmarked. I mean, there's on the Figma community, there's some big hitters like IBM Carbon, obviously Google Material, Atlassian, Uber Base. And a lot of these things are also available on their design system websites. But as you say, yeah, I guess the most notable one for me is gov.uk that doesn't. They've always gone down the road of actual code prototypes. What's that like to work with in terms of, because as a designer, I just quickly knock something up in Figma. What's it like not having that?
I love it. I think it works super well. And I even learned how to prototype using the prototype kit, which is the tool that they use to build prototypes in code. So I think they make it super simple, but I will issue this caveat. Like, people can get very purist about how the way that the GovUK design system does it is perfect and it's amazing and everyone learns to prototype in code. Like, two things you get working in the civil service often are quite a lot of time and space to learn how to code and trust in, I wouldn't say civil service as a whole, but GDS particularly, or at least when I worked there. And the second thing is that they're building a very simple web-based application. So immediately try and throw that into a context where you've got like an iOS app and an Android app and a bloody like fridge application and a browser-based thing, and it's going to fall down. So I think it works really well for what it is, and it's not going to be suitable or applicable to lots of other more complicated contexts.
Nice. I've always been interested in that because I've always admired their prototyping kit. Anyway, you're at the end.
Oh, tragedy.
So, I know. I'm going to round off with a final pop quiz, though, to check if you've been paying attention.
Okay.
In this pop quiz, you get 3 mystery questions plus 1 bonus question on capybaras.
Oh, I bloody love capybaras. You remembered from last time. I'm so excited. I don't know anything about them, but I'm happy to give it a good go.
Okay, first question. What year did Dylan Field and Evan Wallace start working on Figma?
2012.
Oh, congratulations. Okay.
Thank you.
How much did Adobe offer to pay for Figma?
20 billion.
I'm going to have to go back and Google that. I'm so...
I can't get my head around it.
Peculiar. Can you just Google it now? Because I feel like it's wrong. I mean, how can it be that much money? It's like $20 billion is like some kind of Austin Powers.
Yeah, we're searching it. We're searching it now.
Okay,
20 bloody billion.
It was, wasn't it? Literally. I checked it. I've checked that about 4 times because I'm just so bad with numbers. I mean, it could be like 20 trillion or something for me and it wouldn't mean anything. Okay, next question. Thank you, Internet Checker. Which design systems UI kit has the most likes and downloads on the Figma community?
Material Design by Google.
Well done.
I did pay attention, you see.
You did. Yeah. Well done. So yeah, Google Material 3 has got 23,000 likes and 648,000 downloads. I'm just like,
my God, that's too many downloads.
Are there even that many designers in the whole world?
No. It's just it's the same person sitting in his basement just downloading it over and over again. Loser.
Oh, okay. Here is your bonus question on capybaras.
Yay.
You said in the last episode capybaras are your favorite animal, so everything I buy you from this point forward will be capybara themed.
I'm so excited.
Okay. Question: how long can capybaras stay underwater?
Oh my God, I didn't know. I didn't even know they could go underwater. I'm so excited. 25 minutes.
20 billion minutes.
25 minutes. 25 minutes. It's got to be an impressive number. Otherwise you
No,
wouldn't
it's
have
not.
asked me.
It's not. It's not.
Oh,
Capybaras can stay underwater for 5 minutes.
oh, okay. Do not put your capybara underwater for 25 minutes,
It
listeners,
says
please.
they are semi-aquatic and excellent swimmers.
Semi-aquatic. Oh,
Who
babies.
Who would have thought those chubby little guys were so good in the water? I mean, 5 minutes, think about it. If I held you under for 5 minutes, you wouldn't be getting up, would you?
I wouldn't be getting
It's
up after 20
nice way.
seconds. My terrible vaping addiction, Geri, my lung capacity is at an all-time low.
Oh, dear me. Okay, Amy, we're coming to the end. It's time to bounce. You've got to give me a score for today's teacher effort.
I absolutely loved it, Geri. I'm going to give you a big fat A for that.
Oh, that's amazing. I've given you a solid B+ for your efforts. You
Thank
get a
you.
special merit for being so adept in the janitorial arts.
Lovely. Oh, just what I always wanted.
Oh, okay. Shall we round off?
Yes, round
A
off.
huge thank you to Zero Height for having us on board. If they let us come back for a third episode, we're going to be talking about design tokens. Do you know much about design tokens, Amy?
No, and that's why I'm really excited to learn about them and teach you about them.
Okay, there's a lot of
I know
chatter
what
out
one
there.
is, but that's it.
Yeah, we'll have a good look at that. How do you architect them? You know, there's so much conflicting advice out there. Amy's going to go away and do some research and put tokens under the microscope. So join us to back to school on the 17th of April.